All right, joining us to discuss the Electricity Minister's address at the Indaba and all other related energy matters is energy expert Chris Yelland to weigh in on all these developments. Good afternoon, Chris. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. So the Minister in his address today emphasized that South Africa is focused on adding to the energy mix, not so much on subtracting, saying they will not decimate coal, which was him almost echoing the sentiments of Minister Mantashe around coal. Your views on that statement?
Yeah, look, there's a lot of talk and it's been going on for years. But the only game in town right now is wind and solar PV and battery energy storage. That's what's happening on the ground. That's what's financeable. That's what can be delivered quickly. And that's where the new generation is coming from. And the minister was clear on this, that the very significant majority of the new generation capacity is going to be from renewable energy. But that does not mean to say that the end of coal is about to happen. We have legacy coal that is going to be with us for a decade or two more. We also have legacy nuclear power, which has had a life extension of 20 years. So nuclear power is going to be with us as well for decades to come. And of course, there's a lot of talk about technologies such as small modular reactors, but the reality is that right now they are not available. They're not commercially available, they're not licensed, and we don't know the prices of these technologies. So there's still some way to run, maybe a decade or 15 years or so, before these become an option for South Africa. And in the meantime, the only game in town for new energy at the moment is renewable energy and battery energy storage, and to some extent also the possibility of pumped water storage and gas to power as flexible generations technologies to complement the variability of wind and solar PV. Wind and solar PV on its own is not the solution. It has to be complemented by various flexible generation technologies which enable it to be reliable and dispatchable.
But with this whole conversation around renewable energy gaining momentum, the aspect of transmission infrastructure on the continent now needs greater attention, because we've talked about it to a certain extent, that in as much as now there seems to be that greater appetite to ensure that we secure the renewable energy, our infrastructure is still lagging behind, and it's going to be costly if we're going to try and link, because it is a vital aspect of this whole renewable energy boom, that we need to link to the sources of power. It must come onto the grid, but the infrastructure to get those kind of power lines is quite expensive.
Yeah, look, the minister spoke to this. He spoke to the fact that Africa needs a serious and honest conversation with itself over energy. And one of the goals of the G20 Energy Working Group, which was announced recently by the minister, is the so-called Africa Electricity Pool, and the whole question of interconnectivity between the different regional pools of the continent to make electricity more accessible. But to your point regarding renewable energy, one of the major issues about South Africa and Africa as a continent is that we're underserved with energy, we're underserved with transmission networks, and these are extremely capital intensive and expensive. And one of the solutions to this is so-called distributed renewable energy and battery energy storage, which obviate the need for the kind of massive interconnectivity that we see in developed countries like continents like Europe and the United States. So by leapfrogging and going to these other technologies where one can install distributed generation at the rooftop level, at the village level, at the microgrid level, one can obviate the need for these very expensive grid upgrades and interconnectivity. I'm not saying that it's one or the other. It's not a binary issue. One needs both. but by implementing distributed renewable energy, one can reduce the need for these expensive interconnections between countries. And so we've got to look at what is appropriate. One's got to look at the latest technologies available that were not available previously, that are now available, and these can make a significant impact in access to electricity, and not only access to electricity, but access to affordable electricity.
All right. And then on gas, the minister said his view, at least, gas is not a transitional energy source, it's the destination, and that the exploitation of the continent's known natural gases would increase Africa's share of cumulative global emissions to only 3.5%. Do you share his views on gas being that destination, not necessarily transition?
I'm not sure that I do share those views. I do believe that there is a need for gas to power, that gas is very expensive, especially when you don't have indigenous natural gas resources like in South Africa at the moment, and one relies on imported liquefied natural gas. It is very expensive to liquefy it, to transport it, and then to regasify it, and then to pipe it to where it's needed through transmission pipelines. This makes gas a very expensive option, imported natural gas very expensive. But there are opportunities for gas in Africa. In South Africa, unfortunately, it is all talk. And it has been all talk for the last 20 years or more. We don't even have a gas master plan. We don't have significant quantities of indigenous natural gas. And the finds that we did have off the Southern Cape Coast have proved to be technically difficult and also commercially difficult, to the extent where people like Total Energies have walked away from the Brulpadda and Luiperd discoveries, off the Southern Cape Coast. So for the time being, at least, natural gas in South Africa, remains all talk. There are, opportunities arising for imported liquefied natural gas, but these seem to me to be restricted to the industrial use of gas as opposed to electricity generation. There is a need for gas to power in the form of flexible generation running at low load factors to complement renewable energy and for balancing and peaking purposes. But that's very different from base load or mid-merit gas to power.
Chris, in closing, Unit 2 at Koeberg tripped this weekend. Many were fearing that possibly we would have had some sort of load shedding. What are we to read into what is happening currently?
Yeah, it's very unfortunate that there seems to have been a mistake in the way, the power plants were being operated, and a mistake on a large nuclear reactor can be a very expensive mistake indeed, and it caused a trip out of unit number 2 at Koeberg while they were trying to be working and doing various testing and work on unit number 1. So it should never have happened. It seems to have been a mistake or an accident that it happened, but it has significant consequences. Firstly, it increases the risk of load shedding. In other words, it brings us closer to the edge at a time when Eskom has indicated that its generation capacity is constrained. Secondly, it caused the startup of the Ankerlig power plant in order to stabilize the frequency and to provide grid stability in the Western Cape. This, of course, uses a lot of electricity a lot of diesel, which adds to Eskom's cost structure. But most importantly, it adds to the risk of system instability. If, for example, while both units, that's Unit 1 and Unit 2, are out of service, then the loss of a major transmission line from the north to the south could result in a regional blackout of the Western Cape. And so by having no generation from Koeberg Unit 1 and 2 in the Cape, for at least 48 hours, according to Eskom, does add to the risk of a regional blackout in the Western Cape, as has happened before in 2025 when the similar thing happened.
All right, Chris, thank you very much for your insights this afternoon. That's energy expert Chris Yelland there, just weighing in on the developments around the energy, especially given the address by the electricity minister today at the Energy Indaba.